The Rules Committee will come to order. We're here for consideration of H.R. 1231, reversing President Obama's Offshore Moratorium Act. And I stated to Mr. Hastings of Fort Lauderdale here that the distinguished chair of the Committee on Natural Resources, Mr. Hastings of Pasco, Washington, former member of this committee, is not had an attack, diverticulitis attack. It was put out in a press release over the weekend, and he had, I guess, surgery or something, and is doing much better. He's doing so much better that he said that he didn't want Alcee Hastings to vote in his absence. Since last time this committee was meeting and Mr. Hastings was testifying before the committee, apparently Alcee Hastings said to him that they would offset each other's votes, so that meant, according to Doc, that Alcee should not be voting this week while Mr. Hastings is gone. So obviously he's in good spirits and doing well. But in his stead, we have our Rules Committee colleague, Subcommittee Chairman Rob Bishop, who is here, as well as Mr. Holt. And so why don't we begin with the comments of Mr. Bishop.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, let me have the entire statement.
Without objection, it will appear on the record in its entirety.
Appreciate it. This is the third bill of a series that we started last week. We're talking about the second one today, the third one. This one specifically deals with the 1953 law that requires that there be an offshore plan in a 5-year increments. What this specifically does is go back to actually, there were moratorium on those laws until 2008 when gas hit $4 a gallon. That's when there was this huge outcry, and both Congress and the President relinquished their moratoria, and they established long-term plans, leasing plans for the offshore development. This would require that those plans, which since through administrative activity have been removed once again from that trajectory, would be replaced in that plan, that those 5-year plans would be put in place. It would be mandated that they would go forward in the areas that we know we have oil and gas reserves. It would mandate that the administration has to have a production goal as part of their 5-year plan, and would establish the first of those goals in there, and would allow a governor of a state who wished to opt into this particular situation to be able to do so. So it puts those plans back into place. It puts a goal that is there. It is estimated that in the short term, according to an LSU study, there'd be 34,000 jobs nationwide. Short term, the top would be 1.2 million jobs. That's coming once again from Dr. Mason of LSU. It would generate over a 10-year period $800 million of new federal revenue coming into the country, reduce our oil by 1/3, and at the same time still produce a total that's somewhere in the neighborhood of $70 billion in annual wages that would come from this approach. That would also be at $2.2 trillion in additional tax revenue going to different areas.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bishop. Mr. Holt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We've seen on the floor last week and then today 2 parts of Mr. Hastings' 3-part rapid drilling triptych. Last week, the committee approved a rule that would allow drilling to go forward without completing up-to-date environmental reviews. The same rule governs consideration of what is on the floor currently, which deems new drilling permits approved after 60 days, even if the environmental and safety and economic reviews are incomplete. While those 2 measures represent unwise policy, the measure before us now, H.R. 1231, raises even more serious concerns. A conservative reading of the bill's impact is that it would open up the North and Mid-Atlantic planning areas and the Southern California planning area and the Beaufort and Chukchi and Northern Aleutian areas off of Alaska to new drilling. But I should point out that because the bill is not drafted as clearly as it might be, we could expect that it would also open up all of California. I look at the chairman as I say that for emphasis, and most of Alaska, to drilling. H.R. 1231 represents such a drastic expansion of offshore drilling that virtually no area in the United States would be spared. Where current law requires balance, H.R. 1231 gives the oil companies, including BP, everything they might ever have wanted. It would hand oil companies these vast new areas of public land, offshore, even though they're stockpiling, right now stockpiling tens of millions of acres of public land containing billions of barrels of oil. And right now, oil companies hold more than 60 million acres of public land, onshore and offshore, on which they are not drilling. They should fully use the options they have and make sure they're doing it safely before they ask for more. And despite the claims made by the bill's proponents, this will do nothing to lower gas prices. It will put fishing communities and beaches and new economies, lots of local economies, newly at risk from the next catastrophic oil spill. That it will do nothing to lower gas prices, we need look no farther than the CBO estimate, which makes clear that any increase in production resulting from this bill would not occur until at least 2015. In addition, any marginal increase in our domestic oil production could easily be countered by OPEC. Prices at the pump are not determined by the oil leases granted. It is OPEC and financial speculation, pure and simple. When stripped of the rhetoric, the majority's energy plan is evidently to pile lucrative new leases, expedited permits, and millions in direct spending on top of leases these companies are warehousing and the billions of dollars in subsidies they already enjoy. It's not as if we have to help some struggling, important American companies. These companies are not struggling. The oil company profits go up. Under this will go up further, safety will go down, and the price at the pump will not be affected a penny. So while the final decision regarding this rule is up to the Rules Committee, I respectfully suggest that a rule allowing for as many amendments as possible would be appropriate given what is at stake. We have hundreds of members from the East Coast and the West Coast. Their constituents will be affected by this, and they should have the opportunity to present their case by amendment on the floor. Congress has not enacted a single reform in the aftermath of the Deepwater disaster. No member here can face the American people and say that the new areas open to drilling by this bill are safe from the kind of catastrophe that we all witness day after day on the news or in person last year. So members deserve, I think, wide latitude in considering amendments for this potentially dangerous policy shift. And I
thank you very
the
much,
gentlemen and the committee for their attention.
Very thoughtful testimony. Mr. Pallone.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the Rules Committee. I'd ask to submit my whole statement
Without objection,
for the record.
both of you, if you have statements, prepared statements, they'll appear in the record there in time. We welcome your summary.
Yes, and first of all, I don't want to repeat what Mr. Holt said, but I do want to say that I agree with everything he said. I wanted to describe my opposition, but even more so, my opposition to the bill, but also talk a little bit about the amendment I have. The concern that we share along those of us who represent coastal areas or coastal states in many cases is that in the aftermath of the Deepwater Horizon, the BP disaster, there was a commission that was bipartisan and issued a report basically saying, talking about what kind of safeguards would have to be in place in order for deepwater drilling to occur safely. None of that has happened. We asked, those of us on the Resources Committee asked that those commission's recommendations be put into legislation. It never occurred. And so my fear is that essentially what the Republican majority is doing here is moving ahead with more deepwater drilling without taking any of the lessons from the BP disaster. And so what that means is that in the case of the Atlantic coast, which my amendment addresses and which is included in this bill before you this evening, that almost all the drilling would be at least as deep, if not deeper, than what happened with BP. And the dangers that were outlined by those commissions become worse as you go further out into deeper water. And so there's no reason in the world to believe that by opening up this area that you wouldn't just have more BP disasters, because there's nothing has been done to prevent them from occurring again. So, you know, tourism is very important. In my district, we're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars if we have something like the BP disaster occur. And our constituents just don't want to risk the jobs and the economy that are at stake just for a relatively minuscule amount of oil, because the proven reserves off the Atlantic are very small, you know, a few weeks' supply compared to the damage that would come to the tourism industry, which in New Jersey is the #1 industry. People don't even realize it. My district's along the coast. It's our number 1 industry in the state. Now, what I have as an amendment, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, is after the BP spill, the President revised the 5-year plan to say that there would be no drilling off the coast of the Atlantic for the 5 years because of the BP spill and the fear that something had to be done to correct the problem before we went ahead. My amendment simply changes to, H.R. 1231 to say that within that 5-year period and 5-year plan, that you wouldn't be able to issue these leases and move forward. So it doesn't really change the status quo. You're changing the, well, you're not yet, but the bill, H.R. 1231, would change the status quo to say that within the President's 5-year plan, you have to give out leases that would provide a certain amount of 2.5 billion barrels of oil or 7.5 trillion cubic feet of natural gas. What I'm saying is, in my amendment, is leave the status quo the way it is, because the reason in the 5-year plan does not allow for drilling off the Atlantic is because the BP spill showed that in those deep water areas, which is the only area covered off the Atlantic, that we aren't prepared to go ahead because you haven't implemented the recommendations of the Commission. And I would say, you know, because I know you're looking at the cost of all this, it doesn't actually cost any additional money because it's basically keeping the status quo intact within the 5 years. But I can't stress enough that it just doesn't make any sense to proceed when we haven't addressed what the BP disaster said we need to address. And that's not happening, members of the committee.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Pallone. Thanks to all three of you for your testimony. And one thing I will say that I'm going to be encouraging this committee to make and order as many amendments as possible. Obviously, they have to comply with the rules of the House, be germane, the Cutco requirements and all, but as many amendments as we possibly can. I hope very much that we will be able to make an order.
Mr. Chairman, I do have 2 amendments that I would speak to if this is the appropriate time.
Well, I can't think of a more appropriate time, but I guess if you'd like to speak to your amendments, you're welcome to.
Thank you. First of all, I want to point out that I'm fully in support of and officially a co-sponsor of Mr. Pallone's amendment. I have 2 amendments to the bill that I think are different, but important. The risk, as Mr. Pallone has pointed out, really is unacceptable when balanced against the environmental considerations, the tourism, the fishery, the other considerations. I have 2 amendments that would help prevent future tragedies like what we saw last year, from being extended to new areas. The first amendment would prevent any oil lease sales from taking place in the Atlantic Ocean. My constituents in central New Jersey and residents up and down the coast are really very concerned about what they've witnessed. And, you know, it's less than 5% of the U.S. offshore resources, and yet a large fraction of the American population lives there. To jeopardize their economic livelihood, their recreation, their fishing, their industries because of that small amount, relatively small amount of oil, I think just doesn't make sense. There's more than $100 billion in economic activity and millions of jobs created in fishing and tourism along the East Coast. The Second Amendment plays off of the provision in this bill that calls for a production goal. As written, this bill asks the Secretary of Interior, in fact requires the Secretary of the Interior, to issue a production goal for the development of oil and gas off the continental shelf. And it's understandable why the authors of this bill would want the Secretary to set production goals in these areas. I think we should also require him to set a safety goal. It's worth noting, it's very much worth noting, that over the past decade, lives lost in this drilling were not just the 11 that were lost that night when the Macondo, the Deepwater Horizon explosion occurred. Over the last 10 years, there have been 1,550 injuries, 60 deaths, 948 fires and explosions. Or to put it another way, as the commission, the bipartisan commission pointed out, it is 4 times more deadly to drill in Gulf waters than it is to drill in European waters. The very same companies, 4 times more deadly. And this is not to say that the North Sea is a hospitable place to drill. So something's not right. And the least we can do is ask that the Secretary of the Interior set minimum safety goals at an equal importance with the production goals that he sets, would be required to set under this. I don't think that's too much to ask. I do ask that those amendments be ruled in order.
Thank you very much. I have no questions. Mr. Sessions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I respect and appreciate both these gentlemen from being here. By the way, Mr. Rush, I note that the tie was from our visit to Ground Zero back in 2001, and I still keep that tie also, and I appreciate you wearing it today. Hearty.
Was that from the first anniversary? So that would have been.
When we
No,
were at if the gentleman would
we went
yield.
several weeks after.
On September 11th, 2002,
Right.
we
Oh.
held
Yes.
a ceremonial session at Federal Hall.
I remember. That's what I was saying.
Yes.
See, having a spry memory like the young gentleman from San Dimas, California, I thought it was several weeks later. It was a year later, but at least I remember that.
We were at Federal Hall.
Yes, we were. Yes, we were. I would counter politely and say that I would be shocked if BP would suggest that they would be for working around or not doing the things that would be required by law. I think that they were held fully accountable. I think it came at a tremendous price to not only their prestige but their stock price, and to their CEO and others in the company who simply did not follow existing federal law. To suggest in any way that these companies would want to get around any new rules or regulations or not even follow the ones that are in place, I think would be blatantly unfair to anyone to suggest that a company did not like safety, care about their employees, or to think that they would harm any group of people because it came out of their hide, most of all. The government was incapable, as we learned at the time, of providing proper oversight. But we're not sitting here picking on the government today. I think that this deep water drilling comes as a result of the desire for this nation to have the energy that it so desperately needs. The gentleman, Mr. Pallone, said, I think you said that tourism is the #1 industry in New Jersey. Well, why don't you go raise gasoline prices 50 cents a gallon in New Jersey and find out how popular that is?
But if the
Well, that's what the practical. I gave you time, and I appreciate the gentleman. I'll give you time here in a second. I think that the practical effect is that the way the free enterprise system, or at least a marketplace, works is if you add to supply, then the price goes down. And for an educated, thoughtful PhD to suggest that there would be no impact on prices, that OPEC could simply have output, that is a complete misnomer. The facts of the case are they're terrified as a competitor that America will wake up and go and allow all of its resources where can be done thoughtfully and balanced and that makes sense to be able to have a shot at our natural resources that are wholly abundant, that are waiting for us to be able to utilize. And it does put pressure on balance in the marketplace when someone discovers natural gas or additional resources. The facts of the case are not well understood, but other nations are rapidly using their resources and they're dwindling. But where there's a marketplace where someone can come and bring something to that marketplace and compete against that, it will help American consumers greatly. The rise in prices, which we do understand in Texas also, comes as a result of us having to pay, forget the Middle East, other countries. I think we should enjoy our relationship that we have with Canada. That's where we get the vast preponderance of what we get. But it also goes, and we have to seek out other areas, and there are ships that are constantly coming and going through very dangerous places that cost an incredible amount of money. And if we could use our own resources, we balance a marketplace, we control better the costs that we pay, but it's overwhelming the facts that I believe Mr. Bishop effectively presented. We could have $1 trillion more GDP, we could have 1 million more jobs, and we would have an incredible amount of tax revenue that comes in. You see, the same unbalanced people that do not want us to use our resources are the same people that do not want us to use our assets and trees and have caused devastation in the Northwest to where communities, schools, governments can no longer utilize tax revenue that comes in because we have walled off not only free enterprise system jobs with logging, but also the utilization of our natural reoccurring resources. And what it's doing is by, on purpose, not by accident, causing America to have to rely upon others rather than our own. And we have pushed this extremism, this environmental extremism, to the point to where it has come at a loss of American jobs and consumers who are paying record prices. In Dallas, Texas, we're paying record prices. I thought it was very interesting. A group of lawyers who I have known who are rather balanced in their belief saw that the Department of Justice is trying to build this case against oil companies when it was announced how much some of the companies made for profits. And they're out after in the Department of Justice trying to prove all this gouging and all these things that has caused prices to rise, but they failed to look at the moratorium. And that shows how unbalanced, once again, the Department of Justice is and people who are there trying to rationalize policy. The facts of the case are this. We need more people in this administration who have free enterprise understanding of expectations of performance and the free enterprise system, of marketplaces. And it just can't all be done on a sheet of paper where you figure out what would happen. The dynamic nature of competition is what we are talking about here. The direct contribution of 1 million plus jobs at a time when our country is desperate for jobs, we see an administration and the Democratic Party standing in their way and then trying to justify it by saying it really wouldn't matter anyway and blaming it on something that happened that that company never wants to happen again. Not only the loss of life, but perhaps of their employees, but also their own prestige. So for anybody to suggest that these companies would just like to pillage and plunder and have their way and to do as they choose to, I think is really not fair. Lastly, it's a dangerous job. It's a dangerous job. I've been on rigs. I've seen pipes flying. I've seen things happening. I haven't seen people lose their hands or arms or fingers, but I've heard lots of stories. There are lots of people running around Texas with 2 or 3 fingers missing. What I'm suggesting to you is there are inherent risks with the job, and they are trying to make it safer. But if we're able to do this on shore, it beats the heck out of having to go out 60 miles to get something for this thirsty nation. And I respectfully present my case just as you did. I would yield to the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Pallone.
You know, and I respect your position, but I think that your last point is really what I want to key in on. The fact of the matter is that, you know, I use the Atlantic, but I think it's generally true that when you talk about this deep water drilling, okay, what we found with BP is that the laws were not sufficient. I'm not suggesting here that BP was breaking the laws.
What would that mean? Because they simply didn't follow the laws that were in place.
No,
Forget any extra laws.
What I'm saying is that this bipartisan commission that was set up, and they testified before our committee, I think the same day that these bills were heard, and basically, you know, one was a Republican senator, one was a Democrat, former, I don't remember who they were offhand, but you know them. And they basically said that in order to...
I think it was Bob Graham, and it was the EPA administrator.
Former.
Yeah, I forget exactly. I think so. But anyway, what they said was that if you're going to do this deep water drilling, I'm not talking about the shallow drilling, which, you know, the lease is already out there, but with the deep water drilling, which most of it is, certainly all of it off the Atlantic, that you shouldn't proceed without doing additional safeguards. And these commission's recommendations have not been adopted or even been considered by the Natural Resources Committee.
And you know the reason why? Because they had nothing to do with what originally was the problem. They're simply trying to go well beyond it and use this exercise to extricate more from the industry.
That way,
the facts of the case are the cement was not properly dried.
Well, see, that's
the
where
hole was not properly
Well, that's where I think we disagree, because what I'm saying...
But that's the facts of the case.
Right, but what I'm saying is that in the case of the Atlantic, the reason the President, in the aftermath of that commission and the spill, took it off the plate for 5 years, okay?
He did?
Was because it was the type of deep water drilling which was at least as deep, if not. In many cases off the Atlantic, we're talking 1,000 or 1,500 feet. I think BP was only 500, okay? That
It was a mile deep and
all right, well, whatever it was.
80 feet a mile.
The Atlantic, and I use that as an example, but this is often the case with a lot of it, was taken off the table, and much of it was by the President in his 5-year plan, because he felt that unless we implement these safeguards from the Commission, that it wasn't safe and we could have another spill. So all I'm saying very simply is the amount of proven reserves out there is very minimal, okay?
That is not true.
Well,
the amount of reserves is not minimal. You just testified
I think it's
here
about
that there
2 weeks.
are tens of
I think the
billions
whole
of
thing is about 2
gallons
weeks' supply
that are all over the place.
I think the whole Atlantic is about 2 weeks' supply, Mr. Sessions, and you know you're now risking that without putting in any of the safeguards that I think are necessary in the aftermath
we
of
can
BP.
disagree about where and how we ought to be doing it, but you should not, I think, skew the facts or hit people laid out of bounds with factors that are not truthful. The facts of the case are simple. The law and the safety regulations were not followed. And to say that we need all these new rules and regulations would simply cut the industry to where the President really wants it is. He doesn't want it at all.
See, I'm saying the
and our thirsty consumers, including New Jersey, who have their #1 tourism is the economic engine of that state.
I understand.
They need these things, and the American consumer is sick at their stomach, and it has cost this administration literally a quarter of GDP growth simply because they were incapable of being able to balance things on behalf of consumers. So you don't have to agree with that, but that's what the facts of the case
I
are
understand,
also.
but I'm just trying to lay out where I'm coming from.
I do understand that, but I think you should be very careful to what I would say inaccurately characterize BP to say that they would like that. I heard your testimony that they don't want these rules and regulations. They want to get around
that.
They don't.
I don't know whether they do.
They want to be within the law, safety, and they're embarrassed by what one of their crews
Even if
did.
they did everything they were supposed to do, the commission is saying that's not going to be enough because there aren't enough safety precautions in place. That's what I'm saying.
They came to a conclusion that is reasonable. If they had followed the law and the safety regulations as they should have, they could have avoided the problem.
Well, I don't agree with that.
Well, you don't have to, but you and I aren't experts.
But
in
the
this
commission is an expert. That's what they set out to show,
Well,
and they
look,
said the opposite.
and that's why there's no understanding. Even on a bipartisan basis, we can't agree we should go forward with that. Because I think many Democrats are saying that will shut down the industry, and maybe that's the intended consequence.
No,
of
it's
this.
not the intent.
I hope it's not. I would give the gentleman a chance to rebut
Thank you.
himself.
I just want to say that you did not hear me say that BP wants to cut corners or rape and pillage and plunder. That was not, there's nothing in my argument that is resting on that.
Well, the testimony of both of you both agreed with each other's testimony, so whoever gave it, you both agreed.
But I do strongly feel that we should not be greasing the skids and removing, making it easier and easier. I mean, if we had a struggling industry, that would be one thing. We don't have a struggling industry here. They don't need any special breaks. And as for gasoline prices, I must insist that this legislation, none of these three bills, the two last week today and the one you're considering now, will change prices at the pump one whit. Don't take my word for it. I already told you the CBO said there'd be nothing coming from these for years and years. But take the EIA. The Energy Information Administration under the Bush administration said that if the entire East Coast were opened up to drilling, the effect on gas prices would be, in their words, insignificant. So,
I'll just say
it is OPEC cartel that sets the basic price of a barrel, and right now, at least $40 of this $100 that people are paying for a barrel today are the result
I've got a question
of
for the gentleman. I got a question for the gentleman. How do you explain, we brought this legislation up last week or 2 weeks ago, and last Thursday we saw the largest drop of oil by the barrel in the history at $9. How do you account for that then?
I can assure you it was not because...
Oh, I'm sure it wasn't. Had nothing to do with it.
Just to the House of Representatives.
Just very random.
We shouldn't flatter ourselves.
Well, then that goes to the point you can't prove that either.
Okay. All right.
You cannot prove that either. And so for us to stand here and say, absolutely no impact when you and I don't know our Fannie from first base on the issue. But I'll tell you, Republicans very effectively came on the floor here, and so I'll claim it. Oil prices dropped $9 a barrel. That's how it happened.
Mr. Session, I could give you lots of information about the speculation, about the position of hedge funds in the commodities market, about the work of the commodities exchange, but let's not take time.
Well, you make my point. But to say there will be absolutely nothing is ridiculous. There will be lots of factors, but the biggest one is always competition and new oil. And if you bring new oil, that's like adding sand at the beach, baby. If you like sand and you bring more sand to the beach, it works. I appreciate the gentleman for not only your content, but you being here today. I have taken more than my 5 minutes. I yield back.
Thank you very much. Let me just say at the outset, as I did earlier, and that is I'm hoping very much that we will be able to make most of the amendments in order, assuming that they comply with the rules of the House. We're going to try and make as many amendments as possible in order that will allow for a free-flowing debate on the House floor. Mr. Pallone has just come to me, and he apparently has a meeting that he's...
I'm fine, though, staying.
Well, I just wanted to see if any members have a particular question they'd want to ask Mr. Pallone.
Because if I come before you, I should be ready to answer.
Well, as I said, this is one of the things, the rules of the House state that if a member is testified here, that every member of the Rules Committee has the opportunity to raise questions. Mr. Hastings.
Do you know the amount of proven reserves from the testimony that you received in committee?
My understanding
that exist here in the United States.
Well, my only reference, Mr. Hastings, was to the Atlantic. In the case of the Atlantic, it's 2 weeks proven reserves, is my understanding. But I don't know for you're opening up with this spill areas beyond the Atlantic, I believe.
Well, I don't think it would come as a surprise to you then that the list of countries by proven oil reserves are from the World Fact Book as of January 2010, that was updated as of April 2011 at 049, lists all of the Middle East countries, Venezuela, Libya, Russia, and others ahead of the United States. Saudi Arabia has 19% of the share of the world's proven reserves. Canada has 12.58%. And the United States is 14 with 1.37%. So New Jersey coming into play, California and its coast, Florida, all of the Gulf Coast, the whole of the East Coast. Do you think, from the testimony that you have heard in the committee, that going about drilling for 1.37% of the oil, and I might add, that doesn't contemplate the leases that are already let, which will draw some of that 1.3% down. Do you think it's worth it?
It's not worth it. And what I was trying to say, and I'll just be brief, is that the problem here, particularly when you talk about the Atlantic, which is where my amendment goes, is that as you go further out into deeper and deeper waters, the risks are greater. And that's what the BP spill showed. I wasn't trying to contradict Mr. Sessions in saying that BP did the right thing or the wrong thing. What the commission showed, and it was a bipartisan commission, was that regardless of what they did, we need to have better protections if you're going to drill in these deep water areas, okay? And the fact is that, you know, most of what you're talking about, or much of what you're talking about with these additional leases, and certainly true for the Atlantic, is in areas that are as deep, if not deeper, than BP. And we haven't adopted the recommendations that say that this is what you'd have to do in order to make this safe.
Question. Do you think if we pass this at the House of Representatives level that it will become the law of the United States?
No, it's not going to become the law.
Thank you, Mr.
I want to recognize the ranking member, Ms. Slaughter. I just wanted to, out of respect to Mr. Pallone, who said that he needed to leave, see if there are any other questions. And Mr. Bishop also happens to be one of our witnesses.
I'm here, gentlemen. I'm not leaving.
One quick question.
Surely. Surely.
When you talk about tourism in New Jersey, are you counting the gambling industry as tourism?
Well, let me put it to you this way. I mean, I have to be careful because I don't want to, say anything bad about the rest of the state. But most of that is most of the tourism in New Jersey is coastal tourism related to the beaches. That's what it primarily is. I don't know whether it includes the governor. I mean, Atlantic City is on the beach, but whether it includes the gambling revenue, I don't know. But I would certainly include Atlantic City as being a beach town because it is.
Mr. Pallone, thank you very much. I know that you have to go to the meeting. Ms. Slaughter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Pallone, if you can spare yourselves for a few minutes more, I'd appreciate it. Because
you guys are making me feel bad. I'm willing to stay as long as you want me to.
We know if you have to go. It's
all right.
You just came and asked me.
No, I know, but you explained to me how it works.
all the information we have here is that this bill is called Reversing President Obama's Offshore Moratorium Act. Are we all agreed there is no offshore moratorium at this concurrently at this time?
Well, what the president has done, I think, and wisely so, is in the aftermath of the BP spill, he went back and he looked at these 5-year plans and said, look, in the aftermath of BP spill, I got to revise this, and certain areas have to be taken off the table. And I use the Atlantic as an example. And now what this bill would do, Ms. Slaughter, is put these things back on the table.
Well,
which
there
I
is
think
no
a
moratorium.
mistake.
It was lifted in October of last year. Since that time, 39 shallow water and 10 deep water drilling applications have been granted. We have to believe in Alice in Wonderland. Do you remember how she could believe 10 impossible things before breakfast? We have to do that as well. Now, the poor administration believes, of course, Mr. Holt.
Yes. Since the oil industry demonstrated the capability of a workable blowout protector in mid-February, the department lifted the moratorium, began issuing permits, as you said, and it's worth pointing out that only 12 permits are in the queue for approval. There is no backlog here. Not to mention the
No
fact, as I
rush at
said
all.
earlier, the
Okay.
companies are sitting on billions of barrels of oil already
Already leased.
that they are not
They're
bringing forward.
stockpiling it, is that correct?
That is correct.
Let me quote the administration. Actually, I'll read the whole thing because it's short. The statement of the administration's policy. They don't believe the name of the bill is reversing President Obama's offshore moratorium.
No.
What they think is it's called to amend the Outer Continental Shelf Lands Act to require that each 5-year offshore oil and gas leasing program offer leasing in the areas with the most prospective oil and gas resources to establish a domestic oil, natural gas production goal, and for other purposes. Now, that's the bill they're referring to, which has the same number. The administration is committed to promoting safe and responsible domestic oil and gas production as part of a broad energy strategy that will protect consumers and reduce our dependence on foreign oil. That strategy, among other things, includes a balanced process to open new areas for leasing, prepare for the possibility of oil spills, and encourage responsible development of existing leases. The administration opposes H.R. 1231, which would undermine and circumvent the transparent public process for determining which new areas are appropriate to lease. In other words, they think that there are people who know more about that than perhaps we do.
Exactly.
H.R. 1231 would require the Department of the Interior to open new areas on the Outer Continental Shelf to leasing without any discretion to determine which areas are actually appropriate and safe for exploration and development. The bill would have the effect of mandating OCS lease sales along the entire East Coast, offshore California, and elsewhere without providing states or the local citizens the opportunity to share views about where exploration should happen. The administration is developing a 5-year, from 2012 to 2017, comprehensive plan for offshore oil and gas exploration and production that incorporates lessons learned from the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. This plan, developed through a public review process, will assess which areas are appropriate for future oil and gas leasing. In addition, the administration is focusing on resources that are already available for development under existing plans, and this is, I think, the most serious sentence here. A recent Department of Interior report shows that 70% of leased offshore acres are not being either explored or developed. Given the untapped potential of those areas, the administration is pursuing a number of policies to promote timely and responsible development of those OCS leases, and the people I represent would like us to wait. Do you believe, either of you, that we will ever have a vote on the commission, the independent commission's report?
No, I mean, I think you are directly on point here, and what you're pointing out is that, and this is what I was trying to tell Mr. Sessions, is that the administration has taken the lessons of BP, and they're asking that the commission's recommendations be adopted. Mm-hmm. And they've decided what areas should go forward and what areas shouldn't, based on a very smart and intelligent review of what happened after BP. What this bill does is just the opposite. It says, well, we're going to ignore the recommendations, bipartisan, and we're going to insist that you open up areas regardless of what lessons we learned in the BP spill. That's what's wrong here. You know, when Mr. Sessions says that, you know, we don't know how to proceed, I don't know how to proceed, and I'll speak for us and say he doesn't know how to proceed, but the commission and the department are the ones that did the study, and they've decided how to proceed. Now, what this Congress would be doing by passing this bill is saying, no, go ahead anyway. The commission be damned, regulations be damned. We want you to give out a certain amount of lease sales, and we don't care. That's the problem.
We talked last week about, I think, 79 million acres of public land that has already been leased that nobody is touching. And the very notion that for some reason the Congress or the administration is preventing people from drilling for oil is absolutely specious. And but as I said a while ago, we learned to believe 10 impossible things before breakfast.
If the ranking member
Yes.
would yield. You know, we have a tendency here in the House of Representatives, an unfortunate tendency to try to subject our own thoughts for expert evidence. And here's another case where We should be taking the results of this commission, arrived at in a very thoughtful way by experts. But we have passed not a single piece of legislation based on those recommendations. Nothing to improve safety, environmental protection, or economic use of these of our resources. In the Gulf, oil companies hold 34 million acres. They are producing on 6 million. In other words, in what they are sitting on, there is almost as much oil as they are likely to get from the East Coast and the West Coast of the United States combined. And yet we say we've got to open up the East Coast and the West Coast because somehow we are more expert than the experts.
It's unbelievable after what we went through with that spill. It's really astounding. And it is true, as I think all of us certainly are aware of the fact that the oil prices are set on the world market. We produce more oil, OPEC cuts back. I mean, they're simply going to keep that price high. I'd like to ask unanimous consent to put the administration statement into the record.
Without objection, the statement of administration
Thank you,
policy
Mr.
will appear in the record. Let me just state, as I did earlier, that it's my hope this committee will make in order most of the amendments that we're discussing up here so that we'll be able to have a free-flowing and rigorous debate on the House floor. Ms. Fox.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank the two gentlemen for being here today. I'd like to point out, Mr. Holt, that, well, first of all, both of you love to use the term bipartisan, and I'd like to point out to you that the BP spill happened last April, and up until January 3rd, it was the Democrats who were in control of Congress, both the House and the Senate, and you had the White House. And you've said over and over again, Congress has not passed a single reform since BP had its spill, and yet you all were totally in charge of the federal government during that time, and you did nothing. It sounds like an indictment of Republicans, but I just want to point out to you again, you all were in charge, and you did nothing when you were in charge. And so I hardly think that it's fair to come in and say, you know, it's up to the Republicans who control 1/2 of the Congress. So I think
Was that a question? Have we done nothing on our watch? If that is a question, may I answer?
it's not a question; it's a statement. You didn't do anything.
It's an incorrect statement then. If I
Well, you said
may speak.
Congress has not passed a single reform since BP.
That's
I
right.
am simply restating what you said. During that period of time, Democrats were in charge. You were in charge last April when the BP spill happened. You were in charge until the end of December.
The House passed the CLEAR Act, I would remind the gentlelady.
You said, and I'm
That
simply...
Congress has not passed. That's
That's
true.
right.
Congress has not
And
passed.
the Democrats
But
were in
I was
total
speaking more-
control of the Congress up until...
I'm speaking more, if I may, of the recommendations of the bipartisan commission. That's when I use the term bipartisan, to talk about the commission, the Graham Commission, if you want to call it that. The recommendations of that commission have not been implemented, have not been passed into law. They came out in February of this year.
If I could say, I mean, it's the Commission's recommendations that we're talking about. But regardless, Ms. Fox, I mean, the bottom line is the President and the Department put in place what where we said we could go ahead and drill and where they said we couldn't based on whatever data and facts and expertise they had. The problem here with the bills today is that they're basically saying, we don't care, we want to go ahead and drill anyway. And what we're saying is, you know, if you leave the status quo, then it's fine because those areas where the drilling shouldn't take place won't be drilled. So no action has to be taken. But if you're going to be affirmative and say, no, 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 we want to do more lease sales, then I think these recommendations should be adopted before the lease sales proceed, because otherwise you're going out and drilling in areas where you probably shouldn't in the aftermath of BP spills. So I'm not saying D versus R here. I really am not. I mean, you know, a lot of times I do, so I'm not suggesting to you I'm not guilty of that. But today I'm not looking at a D versus R. I'm saying that you shouldn't proceed to open up areas without adopting these and seriously considering these recommendations. And that's the problem with the bill. And it's not a partisan issue per se, I don't think.
Well, the Senate is certainly free to make its recommendations.
Well, you and I know better than to try to rely on them,
Well,
regardless of who's in charge.
I would also point out to you that a favorite saying of mine, experts built the Titanic and amateurs built the Ark. Thank you.
Mr. Governor.
I just want to say, look, I think you have made the case why what we're doing here doesn't make any sense at all. In fact, it's reckless, the road that this bill would have us go down. I think the good news is that it's not going to go anywhere. The bad news is that we're spending time talking about this and not talking about jobs and how to put people back to work. So thank you for your time here, and I look forward to seeing you on the floor tomorrow. Mr. Bishop?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to ask the Republican representative from the committee questions. So, Mr. Bishop, are you the same lighthearted and efficient member on resources that you are here on rules? Why, yes, Mr. Chairman, I am. Thank you for that particular question. So, Mr. Bishop, was this bill passed in resources by a bipartisan vote? Actually, it was passed by a bipartisan vote. Are safety issues in this particular piece of legislation encountered? Actually, if you look at the entire bill as a totality, for the first time you actually have safety features that have been codified and requirements of the Secretary to certify those safety features have taken place. That's pretty good. Thank you, Mr. Bishop. I am very grateful for that. Is there a difference between the terms lease, permit, and actual production? So one may have a lease but not be in production? Yes. Is there red tape that stops that? Why, of course there is. What is this administration's position so far on developing offshore or actually resources? It's basically to wait and hope that Saudi Arabia is nice to us. That's good. Thank you. If we actually had been going back with the 1953 law producing these 5-year lease plans, would this already have been solved and be effectively solved? I think so. It would have been done. Thank you, Mr. Bishop. I yield back my time for myself.
Mr. Hastings, you already asked questions of Mr. Pallone. And you've not had an opportunity. You want to ask yourself any questions? Because I see that you're scheduled to testify here.
If you wish that I should keep that manner, then I'll be happy to do so.
I'm happy to.
I was going to ask Mr. Bishop a question, since he
only answers his own questions, I think.
I understand, but he was a presenter of testimony here as well.
You're absolutely right. Mr. Hastings.
Mr. Bishop, do you refute the world fact book that America has, or North America, has 16% of the proven oil reserve, and the United States has 1.37?
Those numbers are not necessarily consistent with the other numbers that we've had so far. But what I would say is, obviously, at one time as the 5-year plans were going forward, there was the expectation that this kind of production potential were in these particular places. So I'm assuming that has not necessarily changed.
Then you heard Mr. Pallone testify that if we were to go full blast, and Mr. Holt as well, that we would come up with a couple of weeks of oil reserves. How then would that impact gasoline prices in terms of actual financial numbers? Is it a nickel? Is it $1? Or how much would it impact?
If the premise were accurate, then the premise
I'm only
and your
talking about the
conclusion
Atlantic.
would be there. Once again, there are conflicting reports as to where they are, and once again, if you go back to other lease plans that were established, they have an entirely different schematic. My assumption would be that obviously if oil and gas is not there, oil and gas will not be produced there.
Yeah.
If it is there, then it will be produced there.
I hear you, but I feel very strongly about some of these issues, as I'm sure you might expect in light of the fact that I'm a Floridian, and different than Mr. Pallone. I can assure you that tourism is our number one industry. And if we had destination resort gambling like Atlantic City and Las Vegas would suffer a diminution of their income, largely for the reason that we have good beaches, and I'm hoping that we will keep them that way. I'd like, Mr. Chairman, with your permission, to submit Ms. Brown's testimony.
Without objection, Ms. Brown's statement will be included in the
In
record.
addition, to save time, Mr. Chairman, which I'm not accustomed to doing, I have two amendments, and I'd like to submit my full
Without objection,
statement.
the gentleman's statements will be included in the record.
Right. Now then, I go to what I really wanted to say, and I regret very much my colleague and friend, Mr. Sessions, left. He had a business, and I didn't want to interrupt Ms. Slaughter and the colloquy that was going on at that time and ask him to stay. But, you know, what Pete said here, if I look carefully at his words with reference to BP's being fully accountable, then I have a lot of difficulty understanding how it is that the Gulf Coast Claims Facility has paid out roughly $3.8 billion to 177,000 claimants since last August. But there's more than 20 billion to work with, so there is more than 16 billion left over. Fox News has learned and reported that when the Gulf Coast Claims Facility stops paying claims in August of 2013, any leftover money is going to go back to BP. I have a lot of difficulty. I have some statistics, Mr. Chairman, that I'll submit later showing the significant number of claimants. They paid out 177,000, but there are a significant number of claimants that are not being paid. So when Mr. Sessions says that BP has been fully accountable, that's just not true. And this trilogy of legislation that's being offered by my Republican friends is not going to address, that's the reason I asked Mr. Pallone the question, whether or not it was that this would be a lot of oil that would assist in bringing down oil prices. Not only that, it isn't going to become the law. And there are people in the Gulf and around this country, but especially in the Gulf, that are hurting. They have now suffered in Louisiana, as we all know, and in Mississippi, the extraordinary floods that epic in some of their proportions in terms of them doing it every year just about, but this year seems to be worse. So now they have a compounded situation, and we are up here dilly-dallying about legislation that isn't going to go somewhere or nowhere at all. I'm beginning to believe that we as an institution, and I'm talking to my Republican and Democratic colleagues, are running the risk of becoming irrelevant in this country. Because whether the Democrats, as Dr. Fox points to often, and incorrectly, because even though they were in control, there are still senators that can stop pretty much anything, and when all of the Republican senators do, they stop things. And when the Democrats were in the minority and the Republicans were in the majority, Democratic senators did the same ding-dong thing. Until they change their rules, then we aren't going to be able to have any cross-aisle really understanding in this country. And it's a ding-dong shame that we find ourselves this way. One other point, Mr. Chairman. Exxon is ahead of all of us. Exxon is running ads talking about gasification. They're not even thinking about what it is that we're up here talking about that isn't going to become the law. I don't know how many of you have seen their more recent ads, and I'm not criticizing here. I'm saying what they're doing. And I also submit to you that when we get to alternate energy, it's going to be the energy companies today that are going to be the producers of tomorrow. Now, we keep talking about this little bit of oil that we own. And we're always fond of talking about our grandchildren here. Well, why don't we just go about developing technology that will reduce the automobile mileage on automobiles? Why don't we do windmills and solar and thermal and use today's technology to advance? And if we don't get there, then it may very well be that our grandchildren could use it. But no, we don't want to do that. What we want to do is run our mouths while people are not able to feed their children that exist today and are experiencing extraordinary pain that evidently we must be ignoring when we are doing useless things. And I accuse my current Republican colleagues, and when the Democrats win the majority, it goes double on the Senate side for them.
May I ask the gentleman to yield for just a moment?
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, I understand.
With your permission, I have
well,
an
let me just say
amendment
before you.
on the floor,
I
if
understand.
I may excuse
I understand.
Okay.
Okay, I understand.
Thank you.
Under the rules of the House, every member of this committee, by virtue of your testifying here, has a right to ask you a question.
Yes.
I understand that the amendment is pending. Mr. Hastings, do you yield back your time? Oh, okay. Well, let me. He has an amendment pending on the floor.
Yeah,
This
committee,
what I want to do is see if any,
consideration and generosity
Mr. Holt,
gave me a
let me just
amendment.
ask if any other members of the committee have a question they'd like to pose to Mr. Holt before he goes downstairs. Mr. Holt, thank you very much for being here. We appreciate it. Mr. Woodall. No question. Mr. Polis. Mr. Nugent.
I had questions Mr. Bishop. He did a great job.
He's answered all of his questions. Yes, he did. Mr. Scott. Thank you very much for being here, Frank. We appreciate it. Mr. Garamendi, please come forward. Without objection, any prepared statement you have will appear in the record. Let me say, as I did to other witnesses, I'm hoping very much this committee will make an order most of the amendments that have been submitted to us. Obviously, they have to be in compliance with the rules of the House, the cut-go provisions, and they need to be germane. But most of them we're hoping to make an order. So I just say that in light of the testimony you're going to offer. So if you have any prepared statement, without objection, it will appear in the record. Let me say that without objection, I'm going to include in the record the statement from our colleague, Mr. Runyon. Mr. Garamendi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members. This amendment is a pretty simple one. It's designed to make sure that if we're going to explore for oil off the coast of the West Coast, that it have a significant amount of oil and natural gas to make it worthwhile and to overcome the potential dangers of such an oil exploration and production. The California coast has substantial oil drilling already going on. For much of that coast, for some time, there's been a moratorium on the California side. That's within the 3-mile limit. Beyond that, the federal government has from time to time issued additional leases. Many of those leases have yet to be explored. They're part of that inventory that's sitting out there unexplored and unused. The bill before us would open the entire West Coast to additional leasing and quite possibly additional exploration and production. What my amendment does is to simply modify the criteria under which those leases would be allowed by doing two things. Find the correct piece of paper and we'll get on with it. Presently, the criteria is 2.5 billion barrels of oil or 7.5 trillion cubic feet of natural gas. My amendment would simply say 2.5 billion barrels of oil and 10.04 trillion cubic feet of natural gas. The reason for that change is that the potential area would be of significant resource and therefore worthy of the potential downside that could occur if exploration and production were to take place.
Thank you very much, Mr. Garamendi. Appreciate your being here. I have no questions. Mr. Bishop? Mr. McGovern? Mr. Woodall? Thank you. Mr. Hastings? Thank you. Mr. Nugent? Mr. Polis? Mr. Scott? Scott. Thank you very much for being here. We very much appreciate it. We've had statements included in the record from Mr. Hastings and Ms. Brown, and our last witness is Mr. Keating, who doesn't appear to be here. So that will close the hearing portion, and we will distribute the rule. So you all ready with your amendments? The chair will be in receipt of a motion from Mr. Bishop. Boy, I mean, you're really a full-service operator here. You're offering a motion here. You testified. You answered all your own questions. You're representing Mr. Hastings. So you think you can handle it? Oh, actually, why don't we have a little division of labor here?
I wouldn't.
Chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Grandfather Community, North Carolina, to offer a motion. I wouldn't want to put too much onto Mr. Bishop's shoulders here. Yeah, exactly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move the committee report a structured rule for consideration of H.R. 1231, reversing President Obama's Offshore Moratorium Act. The rule provides 1 hour of general debate, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Natural Resources. The rule waives all points of order against consideration of the bill. The rule provides that the amendment recommended by the Committee on Natural Resources, now printed in the bill, shall be considered as adopted, and that the bill, as amended, shall be considered as read. The rule waives all points of order against provisions in the bill as amended. The rule makes in order only those amendments printed in the Rules Committee report accompanying the resolution. Each such amendment may be offered only in the order printed in the report, may be offered only by a member designated in the report, shall be considered as read, shall be debatable for the time specified in the report, equally divided and controlled by the proponent and an opponent, shall not be subject to amendment, and shall not be subject to a demand for division of the question in the House or in the Committee of the Whole. All points of order against the amendments printed in the report are waived. Finally, the rule provides one motion to recommit with or without instructions.
You've heard the motion of the gentlewoman. Let me, at the outset, say that I think everyone is impressed with the new presentation that we have for the rule here. It almost looks like BP green to me, that's outlining the rule itself here. But I know that that'll be clearly a topic of discussion as we are on the House floor with this. Yeah, exactly. And you can see that we have made a wide range of amendments in order. And are there any additional amendments? Mr. McGovern.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment to the rule. I move the committee grant H.R. 1231 an open rule.
Heard the motion of the gentleman. Any discussion? If not, the vote occurs on the McGovern amendment. Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. Pay the chair the noes have it. Clerk, call the roll.
Mr. Sessions. Ms. Fox.
No.
Ms. Fox, no. Mr. Bishop. Mr. Bishop, no. Mr. Woodall. No. Mr. Woodall, no. Mr. Nugent. No. Mr. Nugent, no. Mr. Scott. No. Mr. Scott, no. Mr. Webster. Mr. Reed. Ms. Slaughter. Mr. McGovern.
Aye.
Mr. McGovern, aye. Mr. Hastings. Mr. Hastings, aye. Mr. Polis. Aye. Mr. Polis, aye. Mr. Chairman.
No. And the clerk will report the total.
3 yeas, 6 nays.
And the motion is not agreed to. Are there further amendments? Mr. McGovern.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment to the rule. I move the committee make an order and give the necessary waivers for the amendment by Mr. Boswell, number 20, which would require the Secretary of Interior to require anyone awarded a lease to give preference to hiring veterans for activities under the lease. And, Mr. Chairman, this amendment appears to be germane and complies with CUTCO, and I guess I don't know if there's an explanation as to why this amendment wasn't made in order.
Well, let me just say to the gentleman, obviously, we are making in order most of the amendments. I didn't say all of the amendments that complied. I think that we obviously want to do everything we can for our nation's veterans, but at this juncture, we have just chosen not to make this amendment in order, so I'm going to encourage my colleagues to vote no on the McGovern amendment. Those in favor will vote aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Pay the chair the noes have it. The noes. Clerk, call the roll.
Mr. Sessions. Ms. Fox.
No.
Ms. Fox, no. Mr. Bishop. Mr. Bishop, no. Mr. Woodall. No. Mr. Woodall, no. Mr. Nugent. No. Mr. Nugent, no. Mr. Scott. No. Mr. Scott, no. Mr. Webster. Mr. Reed. Ms. Slaughter. Mr. McGovern.
Aye.
Mr. McGovern, aye. Mr. Hastings. Aye. Mr. Hastings, aye. Mr. Polis? Aye. Mr. Polis, aye. Mr. Chairman?
No. And the clerk report the total.
3 yeas, 6 nays.
And the motion is not agreed to. There are further amendments. Mr. McGovern.
Mr. Chairman, I have one final amendment. I have an amendment to the rule. I move that to amend the rule so that immediately after adoption of the rule by the House, we consider a bill consisting of the text of my amendment number 7, and that we give that bill an open rule. The proposal would reduce the federal deficit by $40 billion by eliminating subsidies to oil companies.
You've heard the motion of the gentleman. I think we discussed this one last week. I'd encourage a no vote on the gentleman's motion. Those in favor?
Well, maybe we have a couple who want to. May I say a couple words on this before we vote?
I guess so. The gentleman's recognized.
No, yes, we did, and it was germane to the rule last week, and we've been trying to get to the floor a bill or an amendment to allow the House to be able to vote up or down on whether or not they believe that taxpayers should continue to subsidize big oil companies. And I'm told that some people are sympathetic to this, but yet we can't find a vehicle. We can't get an amendment made in order to allow this to occur. And I would urge my colleagues to vote.
Gentlemen, yield. I was one of those who said that I was sympathetic to our looking into this, and I believe the Energy and Commerce Committee needs to look into this. The Ways and Means Committee, which has the responsibility on revenues, needs to look into this. And so I think that it's something that through the regular order, and I know my friend strongly supports that, this is an issue that does need to be addressed rather than simply providing a waiver
with respect, Mr. Chairman, we don't need your sympathy. We need your vote.
Yeah. Well, if I could, if the gentleman would further yield, I would simply say that I know when, as Ms. Fox has pointed out in past Congresses, there has been lots of talk about this. We have begun our work here, and so I'm going to urge a no vote. Mr. Polis.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. If this is made in order, I especially appreciate my colleague from Massachusetts making this in order, under an open rule. And if it's made in order, I would plan to bring forth an amendment on the floor of the House to use the $40 billion offset to reduce the corporate tax rate to help put it more in line with other countries, reducing it from the 35% as low as the $40 billion will allow us to go, which will get the government out of the business of picking winners and losers, in this case the winners of the oil industry, and help small and mid-sized businesses compete in a global economy. And I'll offer that amendment on the floor if this is made in order.
Support it.
I thank the gentleman.
Well, and let me just respond by saying, obviously, we share a commitment to that issue. This falls within the jurisdiction of the House Ways and Means Committee. It has nothing to do with the Resources Committee. And that is an issue which is clearly being looked at and addressed by the House Ways and Means Committee, Democrats, Republicans alike. So I'm going to urge a no vote on the McGovern amendment. Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. May the chair of the noes have it. The noes. Clerk, call the roll.
Mr. Sessions? Ms. Fox? No. Ms. Fox, no. Mr. Bishop? Mr. Bishop, no. Mr. Woodall? No. Mr. Woodall, no. Mr. Nugent? No. Mr. Nugent, no. Mr. Scott? No. Mr. Scott, no. Mr. Webster? Mr. Reed? Ms. Slaughter? Mr. McGovern?
Aye.
Mr. McGovern, aye. Mr. Hastings? Aye. Mr. Hastings, aye. Mr. Polis?
Aye.
Mr. Polis, aye. Mr. Chairman?
No. Clerk report the total.
3 yeas, 6 nays.
And the amendment is not agreed to. Let me just say that I've just been informed by staff that even if we were to have made that in order that under the rules of the House, it would not allow it to be considered because it had not been reported out of the Ways and Means Committee. So there is a process through which we need to go under the rules of the House. So the further amendments, Mr. Hastings. Yeah.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment to the rule, and I move the committee make in order and give the necessary waivers for my amendment number 19, which would prohibit any lease sale from going forward where either the National Academy of Science or the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has determined that use by human beings of any non-renewable resource expected to be extracted from the subject property contributes to global climate. Mr. Chairman, famous boxer said you can run, but you can't hide. Eventually, we'll come to terms with the fact that climate change is real. For the past 2 weeks, my colleagues on the other side of the aisle have been about the business of the drill, baby drill agenda on the House floor. I don't believe that those policies are sustainable or environmentally sound. If I reference just one prize-winning group, Nobel Prize-winning group, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, declared that evidence of global warming was unequivocal, and most of the observed increase in globally averaged temperatures since the mid-20th century is very likely due to the observed increase in anthropogenic, that's human-related, greenhouse gas concentrations. Drilling off our country's shores will only exacerbate climate change. Mr. Chairman, my amendment will force members of Congress to go on record by acknowledging the scientific consensus that fossil fuels contribute to global climate change. Ignorance of this issue can no longer be an excuse. We can run, but we can't hide. And I wish to take exception to Dr. Fox's reference of a statement she likes to make. I do agree with her that experts alleged experts built the Titanic, but I think Noah was an expert also.
The vote occurs on the Hastings Amendment. Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. Opinion of the chair, the noes have it. The noes have it. The motion. Clerk, call the roll.
Mr. Sessions, Ms. Fox. Ms. Fox, no. Mr. Bishop. Mr. Bishop, no. Mr. Woodall. Mr. Woodall, no. Mr. Nugent. No. Mr. Nugent, no. Mr. Scott. No. Mr. Scott, no. Mr. Webster. Mr. Webster, no. Mr. Reed. Ms. Slaughter. Mr. McGovern. Mr. McGovern, aye. Mr. Hastings. Mr. Hastings, aye. Mr. Polis. Aye. Mr. Polis, aye. Mr. Chairman.
No. Clerk, report the total.
3 yeas, 7 nays.
And the motion is not agreed to. Are there further amendments? If not, the vote occurs on the motion of the gentlewoman from Grandfather Community. Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. Ensure the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Clerk, call the roll.
Mr. Sessions, Ms. Fox. Aye. Ms. Fox, aye. Mr. Bishop. Mr. Bishop, aye. Mr. Woodall. Aye. Mr. Woodall, aye. Mr. Nugent. Aye. Mr. Nugent, aye. Mr. Scott. Aye. Mr. Scott, aye. Mr. Webster. Mr. Webster, aye. Mr. Reed. Ms. Slaughter. Mr. McGovern. No. Mr. McGovern, no. Mr. Hastings. No. Mr. Hastings, no. Mr. Polis. No. Mr. Polis, no. Mr. Chairman.
Aye. The clerk report the total.
7 yeas, 3 nays.
And the motion is agreed to, and the gentleman from Corning, New York, Mr. Reed, will be managing for the majority, and Mr. McGovern for the minority. Thank you all very much. And without objection, the committee stands adjourned.